In a secluded mountain village, life was hard, but full of quiet beauty. People worked the land, herded animals, and relied on one another. There was no hospital nearby, no doctor to call in times of emergency. Just an old tradition of healing passed down through generations, mostly using what the earth provided. For the villagers, this was simply how life was. They accepted it without complaint, and for the most part, it worked well enough. But when a sudden, contagious illness began to creep through the village, they found themselves facing a threat that neither their traditions nor their strength alone could fight. In this village lived a young woman named Lila. Lila had grown up watching her grandmother treat small ailments using local plants and herbs. Her grandmother had a way of knowing which plant could bring down a fever or ease a cough, and Lila had always been fascinated by it. Though her grandmother had passed years ago, Lila still remembered those afternoons spent by her side, helping her mix and grind leaves and listening to her soft, patient instructions. But Lila didn't consider herself a healer. She had never formally studied medicine or herbs, nor did she feel confident in her skills. Yet when the disease began to spread and her neighbors grew desperate, she knew she had to try. She started small, making teas to ease coughs, and using plants she knew were safe. Day after day, she gathered whatever herbs she could find in the forest, grinding and mixing, experimenting, and trying to recall the details her grandmother had taught her. As the days passed, the sickness spread faster and hit harder than anything the village had seen. The symptoms were unmistakable: fever, chills, a persistent violent cough, and a growing weakness that left people bedridden. Families huddled together, hoping to avoid the illness, but the small, close-knit nature of their community made the disease almost impossible to avoid. They needed help, but the nearest doctor was days away, and few could make the journey. Even if they could, they weren't sure they'd be welcomed. Lila felt her heart ache as she watched her friends and neighbors suffer. The weight of their pain settled on her shoulders, and with each passing day, her determination grew. She knew she had to try harder. There was no one else. Her confidence grew as she realized that the teas and salves she had been giving out were at least offering some comfort, if not a cure. And she wasn't alone in this. The wisdom of the old herbalist. The village's oldest resident, Mira, was a retired herbalist, a woman who had once been respected for her knowledge but had slowly faded into the background as the younger generation turned away from traditional ways. Lila went to her, explaining her mission and her need for guidance. Mira studied her with a shrewd eye, sensing her desperation but also her sincerity. Mira agreed to help, her voice trembling with age but filled with wisdom. "There are plants here that could work," Mira told her, her hands shaking slightly as she showed Lila a rare dark-leaved herb with small purple flowers. "This one is powerful, but you must be careful. Too much of it can harm as easily as it can heal. But if you balance it with this root—" She trailed off, showing Lila the delicate dance of proportions required to create a remedy. For weeks, Lila and Mira worked together, mixing, brewing, testing. Lila learned the delicate art of balancing different herbs, some to soothe, some to strengthen, some to fight infection. Together, they created a remedy unlike any that had been used before in their village. The first few times Lila tried the new medicine, she was terrified. She would stay up all night watching over her patients, worried that her inexperience would harm rather than help. But slowly, as they drank her teas and used her salves, the villagers began to improve. Fevers broke, coughs eased, and strength returned. As Lila's remedy spread and more villagers recovered, word of her work traveled beyond the village. At first, this seemed like a good thing, but it also drew the attention of outsiders who didn't understand her methods and didn't believe in the power of her remedies. A group of city officials arrived in the village, dressed in formal attire and carrying clipboards and cameras, taking notes as if they were inspecting a zoo. "You're very brave," one of them told Lila with a forced smile, "but you must understand that without proper training, you could be doing more harm than good." They told her that the village needed to leave healthcare to properly educated professionals and that her remedies were no replacement for real medicine. They even warned the villagers that Lila's herbs could be dangerous, sowing seeds of doubt in those who had trusted her. But the villagers, who had seen their loved ones saved by her work, stood by her, defending her as their healer and friend. Lila held her ground, feeling both angered and heartbroken. She had seen the relief in people's faces, heard the children's laughter return after being sick for days. She wasn't about to let anyone dismiss that. Yet the officials left her feeling anxious, wondering if what she was doing would truly be enough. But hope has a way of finding the determined. Unknown to Lila, her story had reached a global non-profit dedicated to providing healthcare in underserved regions. This non-profit had been looking for ways to support isolated communities and saw in Lila a true partner for change. A team from the organization arrived in the village not to criticize her work, but to support it. They watched as she carefully mixed herbs, as she checked her patients and spoke with families. They saw the deep trust she had earned, the way people clung to her as their lifeline. Rather than dismissing her work, the organization realized the value of her methods. They offered to bring doctors and modern equipment to the village, to create a partnership that could provide both traditional and modern healing to the community. Over the coming months, the non-profit worked with Lila and the villagers to build a small, sturdy clinic in the heart of the village. Doctors, nurses, and medical supplies became a regular part of life there, but so did the wisdom of Lila's herbal practices. She continued her work side by side with the doctors, learning from them even as she taught them about the plants and herbs that had sustained her people for generations. The village healer. In time, Lila became more than just the village healer. She became an inspiration, a figure of respect and gratitude. She taught young people about the plants around them, passing on the knowledge that Mira had shared with her. With each student, each new person who learned to make a healing salve or a soothing tea, her grandmother's legacy and Mira's wisdom lived on. The clinic became a place of hope and learning. Villagers felt empowered, knowing they could take charge of their own health, that they no longer had to live in fear of distant authorities or dangerous diseases. And as for Lila, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had found her true purpose, a purpose that would live on through the lives she had touched. Today, that small village is no longer isolated from the world. It has a bridge to modern medicine, but also holds fast to its roots, thanks to a young woman who believed in the power of healing. Lila's story has inspired communities around the world, reminding them of the strength in tradition, the importance of self-reliance, and the power of compassion. And so, in that small village nestled among the mountains, where a healer's song first began, health and hope continue to flourish, one person at a time.